Questions like who are we, how do we make decisions, what is the nature of reality, why do we need other people, are some of the questions pondered by philosophers throughout our history. And it is seemingly mundane, but upon deepened perusal, really profound questions that David Eagleman sets out to answer in his book, The Brain, The Story of You, which was my January pick for the non-fiction book of the month. My name is Angela, your own bookaholic brown name. You can call me Angie. And this is a channel where I talk about books that I have read, books that I'm reading, books that I'm planning to read. So if you're a bookaholic like me, please do not hesitate from subscribing to my channel. Also, please like, share, and comment, because I love to read your comments and engage with you. And without further ado, let's get into the video. This book has 6 chapters, and the first chapter is titled Who Am I? Now, if somebody asks that question to us, we would answer, philosophically in many ways, but scientifically, if somebody asks, we would say my brain. Now, our brain is an extremely complex computational machine, and to answer this very deep, profound question of who are we, or who am I, or our, what is our identity, what exactly are we? To answer that with my brain is an oversimplification and, dare I say, a very inaccurate picture of the actual fact. The neuron networks in our brain are consistently being rewired based on our day-to-day experiences, minute by minute, second by second. So the answer to that question, which could be the closest to the truth, would be that our identity is not a constant, it is a moving target. From birth, our brain, our neuron networks are constantly learning, observing, adapting, and is being consistently and constantly being built, pruned, and rewired. The identity of our consciousness, or what we are, is basically what chapter 1 is all about. Now, going through the chapter, I came across very interesting facts. Now, whenever there is a crime being committed by a juvenile, like a teenager, and it's a horrific crime like a murder or a rape, people and generally the public is quite enraged, and some of them cry that they should be tried as adults. And I have always wondered, what basis is for that particular legality, where a juvenile is treated differently from an adult for the same crime. And this is the first time that I came across a scientific basis for that distinction in the legal system. After childhood, just before the onset of puberty, there's a period of overproduction wherein the prefrontal cortex sprouts new cells and new connections, thereby creating new pathways for molding. This excess is followed by approximately a decade of pruning. All through our teenage years, weaker connections are trimmed back while stronger connections are reinforced. Because these massive changes take place in brain areas required for higher reasoning and the control of urges, adolescence is a time of steep cognitive change. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, important for controlling impulses, is among the most belated regions to mature, not reaching its adult state until the early 20s. Well before neuroscientists worked out the details, car insurance companies noticed the consequences of incomplete brain maturation, and they accordingly charge more for teen drivers. Likewise, the criminal justice system has long held this intuition, and thus juveniles are treated differently than adults. So that was a quite interesting fact that I came across in this book. Talking about crimes and criminals and how our brains influence our actions. I am a true crime documentary addict. I binge watch them on YouTube or any other documentary sites I can come across. And I have always wondered about these crimes that these people commit. I mean, some of them fake mental disorder, but what about those who are really disturbed, who have physical manifestation of that in their brain? If you think about it from a pure moral stance or perspective, they are not actually responsible for their actions. It's some random disease that manifested in their brain. There's an interesting incident that Eagleman recounts in this chapter, which goes like this. In August 1st of 1966, a person called John Whitman, a very completely normal person, he was employed as a bank teller, he was an Eagle Scout, he was an engineering student, completely normal person living a normal life. He got into the elevator of the observation deck of the University of Texas in Austin, and he started shooting indiscriminately, killing 13 people and injuring 33 others. Obviously, police shot him down, and when they reached his home, they found that he had already shot his wife and mother to death. And while searching his home, they found this note left by Mr. Whitman. It goes like this: I don't really understand myself these days. I am supposed to be an average, reasonable and intelligent young man. However, lately, I cannot recall when it started. I have been a victim of many unusual and irrational thoughts. After my death, I wish that an autopsy would be performed on me to see if there is any visible physical disorder. His request was granted, and sure enough, the pathologist found a small brain tumor the size of a nickel, which was pressing against a part of the brain called the amygdala, now which is involved in fear and aggression. This small amount of pressure on the amygdala led to a cascade of consequences in Whitman's brain, resulting in him taking actions that would otherwise be completely out of character. His brain matter had been changing, and who he has changed with it. This really disturbed me. What if I get something like this tomorrow and I start hurting people close to me, or anybody for that matter? I don't intend to do it. I am a normal person. I am not a violent person. But if something like this happens to me, how am I held accountable for that? I will definitely be held accountable for that, but should I be? We are all at the mercy of our brain. Then he goes on to discuss neuroplasticity, consciousness, awareness, and meaning. Now, I will skip over consciousness, plasticity, and awareness because they pop up later on. I would like to dwell on meaning for a bit. You take a piece of cloth, sprinkle some colors or patterns into it, and just observe it. What happens to you. Sometimes it might trigger some memories. If you're an imaginative, creative person, sometimes you might think of some artwork, or you can imagine something very artistic, but otherwise it's just a piece of cloth. Now, what you do is rearrange those colors and patterns to form a flag, maybe your country's flag. Suddenly, this random colors and a piece of cloth acquires a meaning. It evokes an emotion in you. How does our brain know that these set of colors and these set of patterns arranged in this way has this meaning and needs to evoke this emotion? So he says that our conscious awareness is the result of our social interactions and also our experiences, our day-to-day life experiences. He closes the chapter by displaying these two flags, the American flag and the Nazi flag. And he says, your interpretation of physical objects has everything to do with the historical trajectory of your brain and little to do with the objects themselves. These two rectangles contain nothing but arrangement of color. A dog would appreciate no meaningful difference between them. Whatever reaction you have to these is all about you, not the object. That was chapter 1. Brain has no direct access to outside world, right? Because it is locked up inside our skull. So it is dependent on our sensory organs, which act as interpreters and use information sources like photons, molecular concentration, air pressure, temperature, texture, etc. And then they are sent inside our brain and are converted to electrochemical signals. But the question is, how does these electrochemical signals get converted to things that we can perceive, like our conscious reality, things that we see around us, how we perceive our environment, like smell, touch, vision, etc. Now, Eagleman uses an interesting analogy of a city. Now, if you look at a city and ask this question, where is the economy of the city located? There is no perfect good answer that you can provide, right? It emerges from the interactions between different elements in the city. The case with brain is the same. So, the electrochemical signals from different sensory organs are converged, combined, processed, transformed, and then they are manifested as our conscious reality. That is the world that we perceive, that is the environment that we perceive. Now, there is a paragraph here that completely freaked me out. I would like to read it out to you. I will add the subtitles in here so that you don't get thrown off by my accent or my speed of reading. Yeah? Each creature picks up on its own slice of reality. In the blind and deaf world of the tick, the signals it detects from its environment are temperature and body odor. For bats, it's the echolocation of air compression waves. For the black ghost knife fish, its experience of the world is defined by perturbation in electrical fields. These are the slices of their ecosystem that they can detect. No one is having an experience of the objective reality that really exists. Each creature perceives only what it has evolved to perceive, but presumably, every creature assumes its slice of reality to be the entire objective world. Why would we ever stop to imagine there is something beyond what we can perceive? That really freaked me out. My God, I have to talk to you about this. I have to. Okay, so I had never heard of this thing before. So this was completely an eye-opening or completely new information for me. So how do I know that my reality is the same as yours? Now take the case of this woman called Hannah Bosley. Now when she looks at letters of the alphabet, she has an internal experience of color. So when she looks at letters, she sees colors. For her, T is purple, J is pink, and these associations never change. If she looks at her first name, she sees sunset, or last name stands for clouds, or when she reads America, she sees yellow. About 3% of the population has this condition, and it is called synesthesia. Synesthesia is a condition in which senses, or in some cases concepts, are blended. There are many different kinds of synesthesia. Some taste words, some see sound as colors, some hear visual motion. I would like to end the summary of chapter 2 by reading a quote from this chapter. The next time you see someone on a street corner talking to himself and acting out a narrative, remind yourself what it would be like if you couldn't distinguish your waking and sleeping states. Don't judge, people. Don't judge. Chapter 3 is my favorite chapter in the entire book, and it examines consciousness. Of course, that had to be my favorite topic. Consciousness, what we have, is basically a very small percentage of our brain activity. It's extremely minuscule percentage. All our actions, our beliefs, our decisions, our motives, our biases are all unconsciously done. We think it is conscious, but it's not. The next time you're in a conversation, notice the way words spill out of your mouth more quickly than you could possibly consciously control every word you say. Your brain is working behind the scenes, crafting and producing language, conjugations, and complex thoughts for you. The same behind the scenes work is true of ideas. We take conscious credit for all our ideas as though we have done the hard work in generating them. But in fact, your unconscious brain has been working on those ideas, consolidating memories, trying out new combinations, evaluating consequences for hours or months before the idea rises to your awareness and you declare, "Huh, I just thought of something." Stop taking credit for something you didn't do. Then Eagleman goes on to examine questions like, why do we have consciousness in the first place? What happens when consciousness goes missing? And the father of all the philosophical questions, free will. And that's why this was my favorite chapter. Chapter 4 is all about decision making. What drives our decision making? Now, when we are trying to choose between a black shirt or a red shirt, when is this decision made, or where is this decision actually made? These are the kind of questions that are being asked and answered in this chapter. I would like to take you through a small thought experiment that he is explaining here. Now, consider that there is a trolley that is barreling down a train track on which there are 4 people standing, and if it is not stopped, it will definitely kill these 4 guys. But you are standing nearby. You notice that you can pull a lever and change the direction of this trolley to a different track, but there is 1 person standing on it. So then you have 1 versus 4. Now consider a slightly different second scenario. Like, it's the same premise. There is a trolley that is barreling down the train track, and there are 4 people standing on the track. You are standing on the deck of a water tower which is nearby, and you notice that there is a big big man standing, and if you push him down, he will fall on the track and it will stop the trolley. Definitely will kill him, but it will save the 4 other guys. So if you think about it, it's the same situation, 1 versus 4. So the logical utilitarian answer would be you have to save the 4 and sacrifice the 1. But our brain do not work that easily. For the first scenario, it might be easier for you to make a decision, and you will save the 4 people, because our brain interprets that situation as a math problem, and the brain regions which deal with logical problems are triggered. But in the second scenario, the difference is that the brain interprets this as a moral or ethical issue and triggers the brain part related to emotions. Then the decision making is much more difficult for us. I think the most important takeaway for me from this chapter was how understanding the decision making of our brains and how we can regulate and control it might help the society in a bigger scale. In Eagleman's laboratory, they are taking this effective approach with some experiments. He and his team gave real-time brain imaging, allowing cocaine addicts to view their brain activity and learn how they can regulate it. He takes the example of this very bubbly, active woman called Karen, and she is a cocaine addict. I will not get into the details of how the experiment is designed or anything. After practicing this experiment over and over again, Karen learns how to suppress her cravings, and she's able to control her urges. Whenever she gets the craving for cocaine, she is able to control it. Now, drug addiction is a huge problem in our society, and I have always believed personally that prisons are not the answer for those drug addicts, but we have to actually look into the brain and understand how we can control it, because this problem does not lie with drugs or people, but the problem is inside the brain. And the more we study the brain and understand, I think we can craft and build a better society. That was my takeaway from this chapter. Summer is approaching and I can feel it. So chapter 5 is titled Do I Need You? Now, apart from the oxygen, nutrients, and water that our brain needs for survival and growth, it also needs something else. It needs other people. Our brain development is very much dependent on the social web around us. Back in 1944, 2 philosophers, Fritz Heider and Marianne Simmel, they conducted a small experiment. They showed a short film to a group of people. Now, the short film comprised of only 2 simple shapes, triangle and circle. So in the beginning of the film, a circle and a triangle, they are, circling each other, spinning around each other. And all of a sudden, a larger triangle comes and drives the little triangle away. And while this is happening, the circle slowly sneaks into a rectangular structure that is nearby and closes it behind it. But after driving the smaller triangle away, the bigger triangle gets into the rectangular structure and tries to attack the little circle. But when it seems that all is lost, the smaller triangle comes back and the circle rushes towards it, and both of them gets out of the rectangular structure and closes the door behind him, locking the larger triangle in. Now, that was all the short film was about. And after the film, people were asked to describe what they saw. After all, it's just some simple shapes making movements around in a screen, right? Just a triangle and a circle. But that's not what people interpreted the whole scenario as. People saw a love story, a fight, a chase, and an eventual victory. So basically, our brain tries to find meaning and intention behind even the behavior of inanimate objects. So our brain just cannot help but impose stories on anything and everything around us. From time immemorial, people have been observing things around it, like the swaying of trees, the flowing of rivers, the movement of stars, the flight of birds, and have invented stories around them. Now, these stories are essential for our brain functions. It nurtures our brains and eventually help us in better social interactions and social judgments. Then the chapter goes on to examine concepts like mirroring, wherein couples who have lived together for a long time start looking like each other, or empathy, kin selection, in groups and out groups. Now, our ability to distinguish or categorize humans into in groups and out groups, and then dehumanize out groups, the main reason for almost all genocides. There is a small paragraph which I really loved, which is education plays a key role in preventing genocide. Only by understanding the neural drive to form in groups and out groups and the standard tricks by which propaganda plugs into this drive can we hope to interrupt the paths of dehumanization that end in mass atrocity. Because we have this ability to categorize humans into in groups and out groups, and when catalyzed by vested interest who push us to dehumanize these people in the out groups and then can compel us to do mass atrocity, this can be prevented by proper education of how our brain works. Once we understand that, this is how it works, that can prevent us from committing these atrocities. Chapter 6 might be the most interesting chapter for most of us. It's basically about what will be the future of brain development and brain science development. What will it mean to be a human in 100 or 500 years? These are the questions that are asked in this chapter. Like, we are at this stage in human progress where the marriage between biology and technology can transcend brain's limitations. Some of the things that are discussed in this chapter look straight out of from a sci-fi novel or an episode of Black Mirror. Now, there is this very interesting concept called sensory substitution I wasn't aware of, wherein you feed sensory information like vision through touch. It's called sensory substitution, and there are more researches going on. So a person can actually see with the sensation of touch. That was a mind-blowing concept, and it is all rooted in this fact that brain needs just electrochemical signals to provide a perception of the environment, and it doesn't care the form and the source from which it is receiving these electrochemical signals. It just needs the information to process it and convert it into perceivable data. This chapter is so fantastic, guys. It goes on to discuss concepts like robotic body parts, not mechanical but robotic body parts, and concepts like sensory augmentation, and concepts like digital immortality, and our very own dear friend consciousness makes another appearance, and whether we can upload consciousness and live on forever. Very futuristic, mind-blowing, mind-bending concepts that our scientists are working on currently, and what are the possibilities of expanding and augmenting our brain capability. That's how chapter 6 and the book ends. I don't know how much justice I have done in presenting this book to you, but I think this is an important book when it comes to neuroscience. This is a foundational, basic book that you should read about neuroscience. If you're interested in this subject, or if you ever were interested in getting into this subject, please pick this book up. This is easy to understand. David Eagleman has used very simple concepts and very simple language to explain very complex concepts in neuroscience. I'm calling this video a preview of the book and not a review of the book, because this is a science book. How can I review it? What I definitely did was just giving you a brief glimpse into what you can expect in this book. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, please do like, share and comment, and also please subscribe. Bye.